Okay, this is a continuation of my summary on my analysis of how the USA is starting a new Cold War with Russia. All right. And to better understand why the USA is doing this, you have to understand how war is so profitable. All right. That's why we're having a new Cold War, because it's going to make money for people, big time money. And to understand that, you have to understand the Industrial Revolution, which made warfare so profitable. All right. And to understand this, we've gone through 8 stages of the Industrial Revolution. I'm not going to review them again. And then now we're at a point where we're discussing U.S. involvement in the Middle East. All right. And all the conflict the U.S. created, starting with the Iran Iraq War and Iran Contra, uh, then that leading to Gulf War One, that leading to the 9/11 attacks, which started the war on terror, and that leading to the Iraq invasion war. All these wars are linked together. All this conflict creation is a continuous, linked cause and effect. Okay, to explain the continuous stream of conflict creation in the Middle East by the United States, I made this diagram. And I outlined step by step how the USA created conflict throughout the Middle East from the Iran coup in 1953, right, to the Iran Iraq War, that's 1980 to 88, all right, that leading to the first Gulf War. All of these are linked together. And the first Gulf War becoming the main source of motives for bin Laden to attack us on 9/11. So that leads to the 9/11 attacks, and that leads to the war on terror. And then how the Bush administration used a meticulously planned strategy to manipulate all the dumbass American masses into buying into the Iraq invasion war. A total bait and switch. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, nor did they have WMD, right? And virtually all of America fell for it, although people will deny it today. Now, what do people remember from this diagram? 99.99999% remembered nothing. Nothing sticks in their head. So it will be attacked because people have no knowledge of it. Nothing in their heads. So what I want to do is give you a real simple, boiled down summary of it right here. Okay. So USA fueled the Iran-Iraq war by giving intelligence, weapons, munitions, and other war materials to both sides of the war. That is undeniable. No liar can lie and say that wasn't true. Although they'll probably try. The Iran-Iraq war destroyed OPEC unity. That is undeniable. Iran and Iraq are OPEC nations. They're fighting each other. Destroys OPEC unity. Duh. The Sunni nations are fighting Iran through a proxy war supporting Iraq. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. All right. And that lowered oil prices. I went through excruciating detail on all the oil price factors. Explained it all to you. What does the average person remember? Nothing. Nothing in their heads. So what's going to dominate now? A simple, stupid, baseless social reality wave. It always does. Because people remember nothing. There's nothing in their heads. The Iran-Iraq war left Iraq in economic crisis and with an $86 billion war debt. That's undeniable. Now, this is what I want to teach today, and it's going to be attacked. You just watched, right? The USA CIA convinced Kuwait to exploit Iraq's economic crisis with economic pressure in the form of oil overproduction, which became the key cause for the first Gulf War. This is what the key point that pissed off Saddam, that caused him to invade Kuwait. Now, Saddam doesn't need much reason. He wanted Kuwait's damn oil. You know he did, right? But this was the key trigger. All right. And then Bush gave Saddam 3 green light signals. Hey, go ahead and invade Kuwait. No problem. Absolutely proven green light signals. Now, they're going to attack one of them, but they're bullshit. I'll show you. They're liars. The first Gulf War again destroyed OPEC unity, and oil prices plunged once again. Right? I'll explain this. If you can keep it in your brains, that'll be a miracle. It became bin Laden's main source. It also became bin Laden's main source of motivation for attacking on 9/11. Now, I got this from Bruce Lawrence's book, which is a big book, a collection of his writings, bin Laden's writings, and bin Laden's speeches. All right? I read the whole damn book, scouring the book, trying to figure out what makes this clown tick. All right? What's driving him? And he's saying the same things over and over again. Pretty simple, dude. Then the 9/11 attacks started the war on terror. That's obvious. That's undeniable. That's how the war on terror started. Don't lie. Then the 9/11 attacks were deceptively used to manipulate the U.S. masses into the Iraq invasion war. I taught this probably 50, 60 times. What do people remember from this? Nothing. Nothing sticks in their heads. So frustrating. Iraq had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks, nor did they have any WMD. Bullshit. The Iraq invasion war then caused a big increase in terrorism. Big radicalization of Muslim extremists. Then it also kicked off a big wave of sectarian violence. Sectarian civil war. Shia versus Sunni. Throughout the region. It destabilized the region. And it created ISIS. I showed you in great detail. Now, I know everything's going to be attacked because no one remembers anything. So they can just follow a baseless, lying, social reality wave attack. Because nothing in their heads. All right, so today's lecture is on how the USA bears great responsibility for the first Gulf War. I'm saying the lion's share of responsibility. More than Saddam. Saddam was an idiot who started the war, but he was a sucker who was played. Saddam wasn't that smart. All right. So there's going to be a big liar attack. No doubt about it. The liars will try a big, stupid wave attack in social retard reality. based upon nothing, which will work because the masses know nothing. There's nothing in the minds of the masses. They retain nothing of this. The liars cannot attack any of my facts that I'll present today because they're all rock solid. But they will try to attack two places. At least two places. I know where they're going to try to attack. One is the Kuwaiti memo on the November 1989 meeting between Director of CIA William Webster and General Al-Fahad, whatever, the head of Kuwaiti state security. Right? They're going to try to attack that memo, which summarized the meeting. And then they're probably going to try to attack the April Glaspie transcript. Right? In both cases, they're going to say, oh, that's bullshit because both sources are from Iraq. All right? Hold on, I need some cough drops. My throat is killing me already. All right, I'm back. All right, so the liar scum will try to attack in two places. They'll attack this memo, Kuwaiti memo, summarizing the November 1989 meeting between Director of CIA William Webster and the head of Kuwait State Security. And they'll attack the April Glaspie transcript. Why? Because the sources of both are Iraq. Right? This memo was captured by Iraq and discovered, I believe, in around November of 1990. All right? Then they released it. And then the transcript for the April Glaspie meeting with Saddam, well, that was Iraqi because it occurred in Baghdad. All right? But the Kuwaiti memo is 100% totally backed up by actual Kuwaiti oil production data. William Webster cajoled the Kuwaitis to jack up oil production to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis, right? To put pressure on Iraq for the bogus reason of getting them to the table to negotiate the disputed common border between Iraq and Kuwait. All right? But that overproduction became Saddam's key cause for invading Kuwait. So, here's the meeting in November. Look at the production data. It's consistent in the months leading prior to this. Exactly the same. And then you got that is a big jump. Maxing out the production. Over 2 million barrels per day. And this is when Saddam made his first threat to stop overproduction. He threatened Kuwait, and so they reduced. But they're still overproducing. 262,000 barrels per day over OPEC quota. And then 3 more threats were given in July. And Kuwait increased production from June. Look at that. I mean, that's shameless defiance and audacity. All right. And then the April Glaspie transcript is totally backed up by the testimonies of Tutwiler and John Kelly, both of which are public record. Now, I know Kelly's testimony is more obscure, and the average person will never find it on their own. So I'll tell you where I got it. Kelly's testimony is in the Congressional Record on microfilm at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago. That's where I found it. I remember exactly going to the big files of microfilm, and I found it. All right. So here's some background. After fighting an 8-year war with Iran, Iraq was devastated with its economy shattered and burdened with a massive $86 billion war debt. Okay. Now, the USA had played a major role in creating Iraq's crisis and massive debt by supplying intelligence, weapons, munitions, and other war materials to both sides, giving that stuff to its enemy. When we're Iraq's ally and Iran's our enemy, we're giving this stuff to Iran. Especially before and during Iran's Fa offensive, which they took away Iraq's Fa Peninsula, which is vital, critical. And that was Iran-Contra weapons that were shipped. Especially significant were the U.S. intelligence and key weapons supplied to Iran both before and during Iran's capture of Iraq's Fa Peninsula, which cut Iraq's access to the Persian Gulf, and thus their means of selling oil. Right? So all the oil from the southern fields they could not export until they started pumping it to Kuwait and having it shipped out on Kuwaiti tankers. Now, without question, the USA fueled the Iran-Iraq war by providing intelligence, weapons, etc. to both warring sides. I mean, that cannot be debated. Only a retard would try to debate that. Oh, that's not true. When you fuel weapons on both sides, you're not fueling the war. No. God. It's a debate. It's debatable. Retards. The key benefit from the war for the USA was its destruction of OPEC unity. That's not debatable. That's like, duh. You got OPEC nation fighting OPEC nation. What do you think's gonna happen? Oh, they're gonna be best buddies. They'll get agreement on production limits. Bullshit. God. Living in wacko reality. Causing their loss of oil production control, which caused oil prices to plunge. Especially after Iran's capture of Iraq's Fa Peninsula in 1986. That's when the Sunni nations jacked up overproduction big time. I showed you the data. I showed you the numbers. Monthly data. Very precise. I mean, you can get daily data, but I don't think you need that much precision. Six, as we will see, the first Gulf War in 91 would likewise destroy OPEC unity, causing a dramatic fall in oil prices. I'll explain this in great detail, explaining all the factors that were involved. 7, we will see that the USA bears great responsibility for the first Gulf War through its encouraging of Kuwait oil overproduction, which drove down oil price, waging economic warfare upon Iraq, right, exacerbating their economic crisis, And for that reason, that's what they said to do it. Take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis. Then in June and July of 1990, after 9 months of U.S. encouraged Kuwaiti oil overproduction, here's the 9 months. All right. Kuwaiti oil production jacked up with the November meeting, and it stayed high until they're invaded. Iraq warned Kuwait 4 times. So after this, in June, July, Iraq warned Kuwait 4 times to stop overproduction, and then aggressively positioned 100,000 soldiers on Kuwait's border, poised to invade. That's 10 divisions. That's way more than that's needed to invade Kuwait. Do you remember when I taught you Pearl Harbor? Oh, that's right, you don't remember anything. Well, when I taught you Pearl Harbor, I taught you how on November 25th, which was the deadline, the U.S. had intercepted about 10 times. Literally about 10 times they intercepted it. They knew the November 25th deadline to get oil negotiations results positive. About 10 times. 10 messages. On that date, they saw Army G2 intelligence spotted the Japanese Southern Expeditionary Fleet carrying 5 divisions heading to the Philippines to attack the American forces there. So the Japanese are carrying 5 divisions to attack American forces in the Philippines. 10 divisions attack Kuwait, who's got nothing, is overkill. See what I'm saying? This is a massive force to invade Kuwait. If you take into account the fact that Japan attacked U.S. forces in the Philippines with only 5 divisions. I contend that this was not... Oh, okay, wait. So, just 2 days later, the Bush administration gave Iraq the first of 3 unequivocal green light signals to go ahead and invade Kuwait. He waved them in. You cannot deny that. Only an idiot retard will say, "Oh, that doesn't mean that to me." I'll get to what was said. I swear, I'm dealing with ignorant, know-nothing idiots. Big social reality waves based on nothing. Oh, it works because no one knows anything. They don't retain anything. I contend that it was not stupid, idiotic blundering by the Bush administration, but rather an intentional sucker move to induce Saddam to attack, to manufacture yet another war in the Middle East between OPEC nations, destroying OPEC unity, and thus lowering oil price. And it worked again. I swear Americans fall for everything. They can't figure out their way out from under a paper bag over their head. It is my contention that after the USA lost control of oil price in 1971, and after OPEC had devastated the U.S. economy throughout the remainder of the 1970s with high oil prices, the USA needed to recover control of oil price, or at least take it out of the hands of OPEC. And then the USA found this means through war between OPEC nations, which destroys OPEC unity, and thus destroys their control of oil price. They no longer can come to agreements restricting production, especially with the high cost of war. They got to sell oil. How do you fight wars? With money. Duh. You got to finance wars. How does an oil-producing nation get money? By selling oil. Duh. How else do they get money? By making widgets. Selling widgets on Amazon. Alright, 10. Finally, I have repeatedly taught you the many ways war between oil-producing nations in the Middle East is profitable for the U.S. power elite. I've taught this so many damn times. I know the masses retain nothing. Nothing in their idiot brains. Creating Iraq's chief reason for invading Kuwait. During the Iran-Iraq War, the USA played a major role in creating Iraq's economic crisis by fueling both sides of the war. That's undeniable. If you supply intelligence, weapons, munitions, repair parts to Iran, you're creating big problems for Iraq. You're extending the war, expanding the war. In November 1989, the USA exacerbated Iraq's crisis in a meeting between the director of CIA, William Webster. I'll tell you right now, William Webster was watching me back then. I know it's going to sound crazy, but I got a story. I'm not going to tell you this story. And Kuwait's head of state security, Brigadier Fahd Ahmed al-Fahd, their top military leader. Webster convinced Fahd that Kuwait should apply economic pressure on Iraq to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis, right? To get them to force them to agree upon the disputed border. So here's the border between Kuwait. Here's Kuwait. Here's Iraq. Here's the border. It's disputed, right? Now, immediately after the meeting, General al-Fahd wrote a memo dated November 22nd, 1989, to Kuwait's interior minister, who's in charge of oil production, stating, quote, "We agreed with the American side that it was important to take advantage of the deteriorating economic situation in Iraq in order to put pressure on that country's government to delineate our common border. The Central Intelligence Agency," that's Webster, "gave us its view of appropriate means of pressure, saying that broad cooperation should be initiated between us on condition that such activities be coordinated at a high level." All right. Key points. The Iraq-Kuwaiti border was in dispute. After the Iran-Iraq War, Iraq was devastated with a deteriorating economic situation. Word for word, deteriorating economic situation. That's their economic crisis. And an $86 billion debt. The director of CIA, William Webster, convinced the Kuwait leaders to exploit Iraq's vulnerability or desperate financial situation by applying economic pressure on Iraq. Kuwait's means of pressuring Iraq was oil overproduction, which drove down price, stealing revenue from Iraq, which they could not afford given their desperate economic situation and massive $86 billion war debt. Now, since the early 1980s, debt had been realized as a weapon against OPEC, just as OPEC used oil as a weapon against Western nations in the 1970s. All right. And finally, the USA CIA assured Kuwait of its backing with the promise of, quote, broad cooperation at a high level. Right? What is that? That's at least State Department, probably White House. In fact, cooperation and trust had already been established by U.S. Navy protection of Kuwaiti tankers during Iraq-Iran war. The USA fought off Iranians 9 times, 9 engagements with Iran during the Iran-Iraq war. You know that builds a lot of trust with Kuwait. We're saving their tankers. Now, as expected, the USA CIA denied this document, claiming it was forged. But, one, that is entirely expected and predictable. You know they're going to lie and deny. 2, oil production figures totally back it up. See, he's trying to get Kuwait to jack up oil production to put pressure on Iraq. And that's exactly what happened. Showed exactly. Here's November. Here's the meeting. So the real hard facts, the oil data, supports this memo. The Kuwaitis did exactly as Webster told them to do. Right? So here's November. Here's oil production in the months leading up to it. Then it's jacked up. Look at that. Month after month jacked up. And even after Iraq started threatening Kuwait, June and July of 1990, started threatening, right? They still overproduced. I mean, that's insane. That's just looking to get their ass beat. Now, this denial by the USA CIA is totally predictable and expected. The USA has a long history of, quote, maximum or plausible deniability. They do this shit all the time. Now, if you remember my Gulf of Tonkin analysis, I gave you 7 documents with 7 key Johnson administration officials, including Director of the CIA and McNamara, Secretary of Defense, all saying, also Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. was another one, Ambassador to South Vietnam. All of them saying, hey, we can make these attacks against North Vietnam in such a way that it leaves no doubt in Ho Chi Minh's mind that it was us who did it. They're covert attacks, but they can put their signature on it. And yet, we will have maximum deniability or plausible deniability. Those are the 2 terms they would use. We'd attack them, and we have max deniability. No American, no self-loving American is going to believe that. And what do Americans know? They don't know jack shit. So they just believe social reality all the time. Do no research, know nothing. They know the 10-second blurb in social reality. Read for a fourth grader. Finally, deniability is standard operating procedure for the CIA. They do nothing covert unless they have deniability. I give you some examples down here. I'm not going to get into that. How they get their deniability. 3. The U.S. has a long history of attacking credibility. 2. Plant down. They do this all the time. This is standard. This is daily practice. Manufacture an ad hominem attack. So they're going to attack the credibility of these documents. Well, they attack credibility all the time. Duh. And now here's a bit of logic. Oh, no. 4. It is a fact that Director of CIA William Webster did meet with the Kuwaiti head of state security, Brigadier Ahmed Al-Fat, in November of 1989. Now, why in the world would puny Kuwait, with next to no military force, overproduce oil in the face of massive Iraqi military hegemony and repeated threats of attack, unless the USA assured Kuwait that we have their back? We're covering their 6. At the same time, right, when Kuwait had nothing, Iraq had the 4th largest standing army in the world. What does that mean? Only nations had bigger militaries were USA, USSR, and China. Then Iraq. Iraq's number 4. Why would Kuwait stand up to that when they got nothing? Literally nothing. Virtually nothing. Iraq, on the other hand, had 6,000 tanks, 4,000 armored vehicles, 3,200 artillery pieces, while Kuwait had a pitifully small military, virtually nothing. Furthermore, Kuwait trusted the USA because we gave their tankers U.S. naval escort during the Iran-Iraq War, protecting them from Iranian attack, resulting in 9 U.S. engagements with Iranian forces. In short, the USA repeatedly fought Iran to protect Kuwaiti tankers, so of course they trusted the USA. In sum, the USA CIA denial of the document, 1, is predictable and expected. 2, has obvious motive to lie and deny. 3, the USA has a long history of using maximum or plausible deniability. 4, ensuring deniability is standard operating procedure for the CIA. They do nothing without deniability. You got to check that box off every plan you make. The documents explain Kuwait's defiance of Iraq in the face of Iraq's massive military superiority. 6, most of all, the document is supported by the bottom line, which is Kuwait's oil production data that perfectly matches the document. Exactly. Here's the meeting. Boom! Oil's jacked up. Stays jacked up until Iraq threatens. And even through all these threats, they're overproducing. Look, 1.5 million barrels per day quota. 1.857. That's 358,000 barrels a day of overproduction. 1/3 of a million barrels per day. Every damn day. of the month. So the Kuwaitis did exactly as Webster cajoled them to do. Finally, the credibility of the document is supported by the Bush administration's otherwise inexplicable 3 green light signals for Iraq to invade Kuwait after Iraq had threatened Kuwait 4 times to stop overproduction of oil and then place 100,000 troops on the border. So Webster meets with the Kuwaitis, gets them to jack up oil production, to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis, to put pressure on Iraq, and it works. They get all pissed off. They warned 4 times here, all right, June and July. Hey, stop your overproduction. Then they put 100,000 troops on the border. Way more than it's needed to attack Kuwait. And what does the USA do? What does the Bush administration do? Gives 3 green light signals. Bullshit. 3 green light signals. Go ahead and invade Kuwait. Now I'll get to those in a second down here. All right. All right. Now, Saddam had a litany of complaints against Kuwait, right? But the key complaint was Kuwait oil overproduction. All right, so we're going to go through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 complaints by Saddam Hussein, most of which were bullshit, or, I don't know, questionable. But these 2 are absolutely valid. These are questionable. This is questionable. So 1, Saddam's chief complaint, Kuwait overproduction was driving down oil prices, causing a severe loss of revenue to Iraq. Saddam claimed $14 billion lost at a time when Iraq had an $86 billion war debt already. And don't forget, the USA played a key part in building that war debt by supplying Iraq's enemy, Iran, intelligence, weapons, munitions, and other war materials. Especially before and during Iran's fall offensive, which severed Iraq's access to the Persian Gulf, devastating their oil exports. Well, that's big money they're losing. Saddam claimed he fought 8 years war with Iran to protect Kuwait and Saudi Arabia from the Shia Islamic threat. And they show their gratitude by screwing Iraq economically. I mean, this is bullshit. I covered the Iran-Iraq war. I taught that. I taught you Saddam's reasonings. Things like the Shatt al-Arab waterway border dispute, right? Iran's aiding of Kurdish and Shia rebels inside Iraq, right? U.S. intelligence given to Iraq stating it'll just take a 3 or 4 month offensive to take that territory. And I believe Saddam's main motive was he wanted to seize Iranian oil. All right. That would make him the military powerhouse in the Middle East. That would give him control over oil price. And I'll explain how and why if you can't understand that. I'll eventually explain that today. Not here, though. All right. So this is bullshit. It's questionable. Kuwait seized a portion of disputed territory while Iraq was busy fighting a war with Iran. Iraq claims 700 acres. That's a little bit over a mile. 640 acres is a mile. Right? I don't know. Question, maybe true, maybe not. I don't know. Right? It's not that important. It's not a big deal. And another complaint by Saddam was Kuwait was slant drilling into Iraq's Ramallah oil fields across the border. Well, one is on the border. You see, this part is on the border, right? And stole $2.48 billion in oil. Well, how does he know exactly how much oil he stole? I don't know. Here's the Ramallah oil fields, right? You see that they're right on the border. And what Saddam is saying that the Kuwaitis have the slant drilling technology from the United States. This is the same technology that's used in fracking to get tight oil, the sedimentary rock layers, right? You go horizontal through these layers, right? So with this technology, you can make a 90-degree turn and go horizontal. Cross the border. Here's the border. Here's Kuwait on this side. Here's Iraq on this side. So Saddam's saying they're going across, and I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Whatever. Right? Questionable. Right? Historically, Kuwait rightfully belonged to Iraq. Right? This is highly questionable too. I'm not going to get into the details of this. Now, this is valid. U.S.-Kuwaiti collusion to harm Iraq economically. Iraq, here's a quote from two newspapers, Dayton and Newport News newspapers. Quote, Iraq has accused Kuwait of being an American puppet and of conspiring with the United States to throttle the economy of Iraq, which has the world's second largest oil reserves, but endured a costly war from 1980 to 88 with Iran. That's a source of big trouble for Iraq. The Iran-Iraq war whacked their economy. Now, this is my belief. I believe Saddam had three valid motives. One, Kuwaiti overproduction harming Iraq's economy. Two, his belief Kuwaiti was colluding with the USA to hurt Iraq's economy. I believe that based upon the meeting between William Webster and the Kuwaiti head of state security and his document, right, which is totally backed up. That's exactly what they did. That gives it credence. Exactly what the document says they did. And it makes sense. Why in the world would after four threats would Kuwait still overproduce? In fact, increasing overproduction in July over June, right? Unless the USA said they had her back. I went through all these reasons here. I'm not going to go through it again. If you don't remember it, please reread it, right? I know that when I get done with this, the average person will remember between 0 and 3. Nothing's going to stick. I swear. Nothing sticks in the brains of people. Now, I believe Saddam's main motive was the fact that if he took Kuwait, that would nearly double his oil reserves and his production capacity, which would make him the dominant military power in the Middle East and give him all sorts of spare production capacity, which he could reduce to raise oil price. He's going to get control of oil price. He's got way more production capacity than his country needs. All right. So what that means is he can cut back production. If he cuts back production, all right, he's jacking up oil price. Do you want to give all that in the hands of Saddam Hussein? Military dominance in the Middle East? Control of oil price? Hell no. Saddam, Iraq warned Kuwait 4 times to stop overproducing oil. At least 4 times, I say. Right? This is what I found. Kuwait and UAE were producing roughly 1 million barrels per day over their OPEC quotas, which Saddam claimed cost Iraq $14 billion in lost revenue. I mean, that could be an exaggeration, right? But certainly they're losing money. So June 27th, 1990, this is New York Times, reported June 28th. Saddam Hussein warns Kuwait and UAE to stop overproducing. In June, Kuwait reduced production from over 2 million barrels per day to 1.762, but that's still 262,000 barrels per day over OPEC quota of 1.5 million barrels per day. Right. Then July 17th, quote, President Saddam Hussein of Iraq today openly threatened the use of force against Arab oil exporting nations if they did not curb their excess production. That's what I'm saying. Which he said had weakened oil prices and hurt the Iraq economy. Unquote. Right? Then on July 18th, quote, Iraq warned fellow OPEC members today that it viewed violations of the cartel's production quotas as virtual acts of war. Right? That's threatening war. You say that, that's threatening war. And accused neighboring Kuwait of stealing its oil over the last decade during Iran-Iraq war. Saddam accused Kuwait of stealing $2.4 billion in oil from border wells. Remember I told you that? Right? July 19th, 1990. Tariq Aziz, who is Saddam's right-hand man, said Kuwait and UAE overproduction was tantamount to, quote, military aggression against Iraq. That's threat of war, which is an act of war. Aziz called Kuwait overproduction of oil a premeditated and deliberate plan to weaken Iraq and undermine its economy and security. This is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now, even with these four threats, there may have been more, but this is what I found. In July, Kuwait increased oil production from 262,000 to 358,000 barrels per day over OPEC quotas, right? So they made all, and they make all these threats, and they increase production. What the hell? After 4 Iraqi threats of war on Kuwait, Saddam placed 30,000 troops and 200 tanks on Kuwait's border, and then swiftly built it up to 100,000 men. That's 10 divisions. Now compare that to November 25th, 1941, the deadline day known from 10 messages, right? G2 Army Intelligence cites the Japanese Southern Fleet underway. The attack is on, carrying 5 divisions to invade the Philippines. and defeat the U.S. forces. So Japan's going to take 5 divisions to defeat U.S. forces. Man, 10 divisions to take on Kuwait is way overkill. See, this is a massive force. Now, what would be the strategic threat of Saddam seizing Kuwait? Oh, nothing. That's okay. Retards. Saddam would nearly double his oil reserves and oil production capacity. Right? Saddam would assuredly use his increased oil revenues to purchase weapons to become the dominant military power in the Middle East, creating a destabilizing threat. You cannot allow that. You cannot allow a troublemaker like Saddam to do that. Saddam would use his newly acquired spare production capacity to restrict production and so drive up oil price to increase his revenues, but thereby harming the world economy. It's going to kill the world economy. Right? You can't allow that. That's a threat to the world. Both of these are threats that USA cannot allow. So why does the Bush administration give green lights? Because they want a war. And they know the war is going to bust OPEC. And that's going to drive down oil prices. And that's going to be big profits for oil companies and boost the U.S. and world economy, which is making more money. Now, is this threat obvious? It's like, duh! McFly, you got a brain? Absolutely, it's obvious. Any idiot can easily see it. Well, maybe not the average American, I swear. I swear Americans are so retarded. Or they're liars. I mean, 99.999999999 know nothing. Retain nothing. All they ever know is a big, simple, stupid, lying, social retard reality wave. That's all they ever know. I mean, you can't force it in their brains. Even if you could, like, shove a funnel in their ear, force it in their brains, it'll all just leak out. I swear. It'll all just leak out like wet diarrhea coming out of their ears. Is that threat credible? Did Saddam try before? Yeah. That's exactly what he did in the Iran-Iraq war. He tried to do the same thing with Iran. If he captured Iran's Kurdistan province oil, he'd double his oil reserves and his production capacity. Then he'd dominate the Middle East militarily. Then he'd have way more production capacity with which he could control price. Remember the concept called monitor spare production? You probably don't. Given the enormity of this threat, what should have the U.S. response have been? I mean, if it's me, I'd be shouting in his face, don't even think about it. Don't even blink in the direction of Kuwait, or you will be smashed by a massive military response. Now, I'll give you the Eisenhower example. In 1954, Communist China began shelling 2 Republic of China islands. That's Taiwan. Off China coast. Quemoy and Matsu. So here's Matsu, here's Quemoy. These 2 islands belong to Taiwan, even though they're right on the China China coast, right? But they belong to Taiwan. Now the Chinese started showing them, and the U.S. saw this as probing action to test American commitment to defend Taiwan, right? So if you let this happen without doing anything about it, right, that's going to increase risk that the Chinese will take it a step further and go after Taiwan. So this is like a probing action, trying to take these guys. You do nothing, you're inviting an attack on Taiwan. That's what I'm saying, right? So if it was a probing action, and if the USA did not respond, that would increase probability of a communist attack upon Taiwan. Now, you don't want to. That's the last thing. You want to decrease the probability. So how did Eisenhower respond? Well, they decreased the probability. One, Eisenhower signed a mutual defense treaty. Stating unequivocally USA's commitment to Taiwan's defense. Two, Eisenhower rapidly deployed U.S. military forces to the region. Another unequivocal statement of U.S. commitment to Taiwan's defense. This is standard operating procedure. You get planes in the air. You get quick reaction teams in the air or underway on ships. Get them going. You can do that within a day. The Eisenhower administration hinted at the U.S. or the use of nuclear weapons, although Eisenhower himself was against it. People in his administration were like, we're going to use nukes, right? So China is threatening Taiwan by threatening these islands here. Iraq is threatening Kuwait with 4 threats of attacking and then putting 100,000 troops on the border. That is an absolute and obvious threat. I don't care how stupid you are. There's no excuse for not seeing that. You got to be beyond belief retarded not to see that. So here's extreme opposites of what you could do. What you should do on this end, extreme what you should not do. Well, the Bush administration did not do this. Eisenhower, they did pretty good here. They did a pretty good job, right? They could have done some other things. Not bad, right? What does the Bush do? They did the opposite. Not in the middle. They did the exact opposite. They invited an attack. They green lit. Turn on the green lights. Go ahead, Saddam. 3 times. Green light number 1. The day after Saddam placed a massive army on the Kuwaiti border, poised to attack. After 4 threats to attack, the spokesperson for the State Department, Margaret Tutwiler, under instruction by James Baker, this scumbag here, made an unsolicited official press release. We do not have any defense treaties with Kuwait, and there are no special defense or security commitments to Kuwait. Unquote. Direct quote. Public record. Look it up. Don't lie and deny. That's what she said. This chick here. Now, why would you make such a statement like that? Right? Why would you make such a statement at any time? Let alone after they threatened to attack 4 times and put 100,000 troops on the border. Then you say, oh! I mean, that's insane, crazy, stupid, beyond belief. Who is that stupid? You never make such a statement at any time. Why do you announce this to the world? Oh, we don't have any defense treaty. Why do you bother announcing that to the world? We don't have a defense treaty with Kuwait, nor do we have any special defense or security commitment to Kuwait. Bullshit! You just opened the door for an attack. You said, we're going to stay out of this. Do whatever you want. Who's the big deterrent for Iraq? Kuwait? Hell no. Kuwait's got nothing. It's USA. And USA just gave the go-ahead. Don't try to spin this. Don't try to say, no, it don't mean that. Oh, bullshit. No one is that stupid. That's super crazy stupid beyond belief. And it is exactly 180 degrees opposite to what Eisenhower did. Okay, green light number 2. Now, this is the one that the liars are going to attack. Oh, that never happened. That's made up because Iraq released it. Well, let's take a look at it. Okay. Now, the very next day, Saddam Hussein called on the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie, right? Where am I? To confirm Tutwiler's statement, Glaspie said this, quote, but we have no opinion on Arab conflicts like your border disagreement with Kuwait. James Baker has directed our official spokesman, Tutwiler, to emphasize this instruction. And she did! This is undeniably on record. This is U.S. public record. She said it. Here's Glaspie. Right? And sure enough, Tutwiler made that announcement. It is obvious Baker Bush are behind this because Tutwiler is just a spokesperson. She is just the mouth. She has no authority to make U.S. policy. These guys have it. Bush, Baker. So why did the Bush administration use low-level persons like Tutwiler and Glaspie to publicly set up the conditions for war? This is a classic method of starting a war. It's called a peace persona, which means if you want to start a war, you must make every appearance that the head of state, right here, is desperately doing everything for peace, even while he's maneuvering the nation into war. This is done throughout our history. I studied this throughout European history, European wars. This is an old trick. Done every time. Oh, but the masses fall for it every time. You know why? Because they know jack squat shit about history. Nothing. Masses know nothing about U.S. history. Nothing in their brains. They fall for the same crap over and over again. All right. So now this came from a microfiche film from the congressional resolution. Congressional record. Assistant Secretary of State for Near East John Kelly was testifying at a congressional hearing on the Iraq Kuwait debate. I forget the date. I know it was like just a few days after Tutwiler. Now you're gonna see he says the exact same thing as Tutwiler, exact same thing as Glaspie. So, what Glaspie said is supported by Tutwiler, is supported by John Kelly. They said the exact same thing as this. So don't tell me this is a lie. These guys said the exact same thing. Just listen. So here's John Kelly. Here's the best picture I found him. He's been grilled by Lee Hamilton. This old fart, been around forever. Congressman from Indiana. Or senator from Indiana. One or the other. Lee Hamilton. Quote, what is precisely the nature of our commitment to supporting our friends in the Gulf? We have no defense treaty relationship with Gulf. That's what Tutwiler said. Exactly what she said. No defense. Why do you say that? Do we have a commitment to our friends in the Gulf? Well, he just repeats it. We have no defense treaty, right? We have no defense treaty relation with any of our countries. I mean, why do you say that? We have historically avoided taking a position on border disputes or on internal OPEC deliberations, oil, right? That's what Glaspie said. Don't say she didn't say it. That's exactly what John Kelly on U.S. public record, official U.S. government documents. He's saying no opinion on Arab conflicts like a border disagreement. We have historically avoided taking position on border disputes. If Iraq, for example, charged across the border into Kuwait for whatever reason, what would be our position with regard to the use of U.S. forces? In that circumstance, is it correct to say, however, that we do not have a treaty commitment which would obligate us to engage U.S. forces? That is correct. That is correct, is it not? That is correct, sir. Right? Like, absolutely. We have no obligation to do jack shit. That's green light. Green light after 4 threats to attack Kuwait. 100,000 troops on the border. That's just insanely stupid. Now, you're going to get the average American. No, that's not stupid to me. That makes sense to me. Well, that's because it's stupid. Come on. That's debatable. That seems very smart to me. You know, I swear, I'm teaching this to a wall. Honestly, I am. You know, it's like Barnaby the Scrivener. You got a big white wall. Big, dumb, uncomprehending wall. It's not going to retain anything. It's a billboard for social reality. Which is what? It's retard reality. Iraq's economy was in crisis after the Iran-Iraq War. Here's a review. Right? Bush's green lighting synopsis tag. So Iraq's economy was in crisis after the Iran-Iraq War. Big debt. The USA CIA cajoled Kuwait to take advantage of Iraq's crisis and put economic pressure on Iraq to come to agreement on the disputed border. The USA CIA denied this, but that is expected, and oil data proves this is exactly what was done. Where do I have that data? That's exactly what was done. Right here. Here's a meeting jacked up. State high even through threats. Kuwait immediately increasing its oil overproduction after the meeting. All right. After 9 months of U.S. encouraged Kuwaiti overproduction, Iraq threatened war on Kuwait 4 times, and then placed 100,000 invasion force on Kuwait's border. The next day, the Bush administration gave the first of 3 green light signals, which are inexplicable in that it is extreme opposite of what the U.S. should have done. So here's a scale of what you should do, right? Here's do nothing. Here's exact opposite of what you should do. Extreme opposite, right? So this is what the Bush administration should have done. Should have signed a defense treaty with Kuwait. That's what Eisenhower did with Taiwan. Make an unequivocal threat a massive military response, right? Don't even blink in that direction or you're going to get your ass kicked. You rapidly deploy forces, both air and sea. Get them underway. Naval forces may take a month to get there. But so what? You see them underway right away. You report that in the paper. Air forces may get there in a couple days. A few days. Depending how fast you can mobilize, right? You get them going right away, though. Initial units, get them going that day. Load them up. Get them underway. Report it in the papers. Align a coalition of allies against Iraq, especially including other Middle East nations. Get Middle East nations turned against Iraq. Get United Nations backing, perhaps even a resolution against Iraq. Now, if I were president, I would get some statement by NATO. That's another resource, right? Now, I probably wouldn't go so far as getting a commitment for action by NATO because that would maybe be hard to get, especially since all NATO actions require unanimous decision. All it takes is one to say no, right? And you're screwed. So I'd probably give up, a buffet of options, at least like 2 options, right? Some statement which is, it shows commitment, but is not really binding as far as action, right? You can get that. Now, in the middle here, you do nothing. An example of doing nothing is FDR. In May of 1941, the USA made 2 threats to cut oil to Japan. On May 31st, it's reported in the New York Times that the Japanese threatened war if oil is cut off. They didn't say, oh, there might be war. They said there will be war if you cut off oil. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, FDR was silent to that threat. Is that what you do if a nation threatens war with you? I mean, FDR is my favorite president. Don't get me wrong. I think he was smart in doing this, right? But if some nation threatens you, you don't do that. So why was he silent? Well, if he made a big deal here about Japan attacking us and we cut off oil, well, everyone's going to know that if we cut off oil, Japan's going to attack us. Then when they attacked us on November 7th, people would say, well, I guess it serves us right. We're kind of its fault because we cut off oil. You don't want that. You want people all crazy pissed off. So that's why he stayed silent, so that people would not connect together the oil with the attack. Which was absolutely the reason why Japan attacked us. Oh, but you don't get that in history books, which are shit. So now, did Bush do the exact thing to do? No, none of this. Did he do nothing? No, he didn't do. He didn't just sit there and do nothing. He did the exact opposite, extreme opposite on the scale of what you should not do. That's what we did. George H.W. Bush went all the way to the extreme opposite and openly invited an attack. 3 green lights. That's not simply leaving them hung out to dry, which means to abandon them in time of threat or crisis. That's openly inviting an attack. It's worse than abandoning them. Now, there's no debate in that. That's obvious. But you're going to get these morons saying, oh, that's debatable. I don't think you left them hung out to dry. No, we're not Greenland. Bullshit. In the manufactured build, here's something. In the manufactured build-up to manipulate the USA into the Iraq invasion war, one thing that George H.W. Bush's son, G.W. Bush, said was that Saddam attacks without warning. He said this crap when was that? In October, right before the vote on the resolution. Saddam attacks without warning. Bullshit! Iraq warned 4 times here. And what did Bush's daddy do? Nothing? No, he didn't just do nothing. He invited an attack. That's history. That's what happened. Don't try to spin this. Oh, I don't see that as an invitation. Bullshit! Iraq threatens 4 times, puts 100,000 troops on the border, and then he say, hey, we don't have any treaty with Kuwait. We got no defense treaty, nor do we have any special defense or security command. What the? Are you kidding me? If you think that's not an open invitation, I'm going to slap you in the head. You deserve to be slapped in the head. Goodness sakes. So let's put it all together. Why? Because the mass is not going to remember anything, I swear. They're going to walk away knowing nothing from this. Then the liars are going to pass a big wave, and the big wave, based on nothing, is going to win, as it always does. It's hopeless. People are ignorant retards forever. They never learn anything. They cannot retain anything. By itself, the Bush administration's green-lighting Saddam to attack Kuwait was so insanely stupid that it makes no sense. But if you put it all together, it makes perfect sense. And it becomes clear that it was a sucker move. Saddam was a sucker. Played. Got an attack. Doofus. A chump. Saddam wasn't all that smart. He's just a brutal scumbag. U.S. lost control of oil price to OPEC in 1971. Remember that? How many times did I teach you that? Throughout the remainder of the 1970s, OPEC killed the U.S. economy. with high oil prices, starting with a 73 oil embargo. The USA was in desperate need of a way to regain control of oil price, or at least take it out of the hands of OPEC. During the Iran-Iraq War, the U.S. supplied intelligence, weapons, munitions, and other war materials, like repair parts, to both sides of the war, fueling the war. Now, the Iran-Iraq War, fought between OPEC nations, divided OPEC. You cannot deny that. Causing OPEC to lose control of oil price. That happened. And oil price plummeted during the war, especially after Iran's capture of the Faw Peninsula. All right? I mean, it dropped like a rock in a month. Straight down, falling off a cliff. I showed you that. Hopefully you remember something. I showed you that maybe a dozen times already. If it worked in one war, the Iran-Iraq War, it'll work in another war, like the first Gulf War. After the war, Iraq's economy was devastated and burdened with 86 billion war debt. The USA bore some responsibility for Iraq's economic crisis, right? You cannot deny that. How much exactly? Well, it's hard to say, but definitely bore a big part of it with all the weapons, intelligence, and munitions supplied to both sides. We're fueling that war. It was no small effort that we had. In November of 1989, Director of the CIA, William Webster, convinced the Kuwaitis to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis and put pressure on Iraq. Kuwait agreed and overproduced oil above OPEC quota, right? Exactly what, here's the meeting. Here's the increase in production, right? Look at this. Constant. Oh, what do you know? What a coincidence. At a state high. Oh, what a coincidence. Bullshit. That's a fake document. That never really happened. Bullshit. Oil data says so. Liars, deniers, lie and deny all the time. And this became Saddam's key motive for attacking Kuwait. So, this means the USA played a big part in creating Saddam's motive to attack Kuwait, which caused the first Gulf War. Though the USA denied the document, which is expected, because the U.S. government has a long history of lying and denying with maximum or plausible deniability. Most of all, Kuwait's actual oil production data perfectly supports it. That's exactly what they did. What Webster told them to do, they exactly did. Perfectly timed with a meeting. And again, why would Kuwait do this? Especially after multiple threats. When Iraq has a fourth largest standing army in the world. Kuwait's got nothing. Virtually nothing. Unless Kuwait had the backing of the USA. As was said in that memo, the USA had promised Kuwait backing with, quote, coordination at a high level. But after the Iraq after Iraq threatened Kuwait 4 times and placed 100,000 soldiers invasion force on the border of Kuwait. The Bush administration did more than abandon Kuwait in time of danger. The Bush administration actively encouraged an attack by giving Saddam 3 green light signals to go ahead and invade Iraq. That's not simple abandonment. That's doing worse than that. Hey, we don't have any defense treaty with Kuwait. Nor do we have any special defense or security commitment to Kuwait. And we got no opinion on Arab border disputes or OPEC deliberations. Bullshit! That's open invitation to attack. If you can't see that, I swear, I wish I could slap you in the head. But that's not going to help. The U.S. has no defense treaty with Kuwait, nor do we have any defense or security commitment to Kuwait. That's word for word Tutwiler. And then Glaspie said, no. And then Kelly said both of them. Kelly said all of this. So, Glaspie is supported by Tutwiler. Glaspie is supported by Kelly. Don't lie. Now, why would you make this statement anytime, let alone with such a clear and obvious threat screaming in your face? 4 threats to attack and a massive army placed on the border. You think that's not an obvious threat? Why would you come out with a statement like that? Anytime. Let alone under such a threatening situation. There's no explanation for it. There's no excuse for it. It's an intentional sucker move. The first Gulf War became another war between OPEC nations that once again divided OPEC, causing oil prices to plummet. Right? So here, I'll show you. Here is 73 oil embargo. Bam! Oil prices up. Climbing. Here is Iran Revolution. Bam! Oil prices up. Here is start of the Iran-Iraq War. It played a part in lowering oil price. But by 1986, the only factor in play that could cause this fall was the war. Was the massive Sunni overproduction after Iraq lost the Faw Peninsula to Iran. That was panic time for the Sunni nations. They were overproducing oil. Oil prices plummeted. Right? Now, the Gulf War, this is the start of the Gulf War. In fact, from all my reading of New York Times at the time, right, I read every damn article in the Gulf War and OPEC. Oil prices. The day the air war started, I think it was like January 14th, something like that. The day it started, oil prices plummeted. That day. Bam! Fell. Right? And then this is the decade. This is the 98. 99. Right? Now, there was another factor involved. Right around here, you had Asian economies tank. There was a financial crisis started by a crisis with Thailand currency, right, and caused uh, in Asian economic slowdown, right? But now the big rise here is due to uh, OPEC finally recovered, right? And also Asian economies recovered. So this climb in oil prices due to that. But you could say the war caused oil prices to fall somewhere at least down to here, and then contributed to the fall down to here. All right. Now, what should have happened to oil prices during this decade? They should have gone up like this. I'll show you why. Oil prices should have been climbing, somewhat similar to this climb here. That's due to two factors. I'll explain that in a little bit. Just keep that in mind, right? I'll explain this. Instead of falling, it should have climbed. Oil prices should have gone up. Now, if you can integrate all the above things that I said, which you've forgotten already, I know 99.99999% of people have retained none of this. None of this is in their heads. Right? If you can integrate all this and see the full picture, it is clearly evident that this was not simply a random series of idiotic moves, right? Was a series of, insanely stupid moves. Instead, it is an obvious setup and a sucker move to lure Saddam into attacking Kuwait, to start a new war between OPEC nations in the Middle East, which have proven to destroy OPEC unity and lower oil price. So the USA, CIA created Saddam's motive for attacking Kuwait with Kuwaiti overproduction. And then, after Saddam threatens Kuwait 4 times, puts 100,000 troops on the border, Bush administration gives a green light to Saddam 3 times. And this is not the first time oil was used in a tricky game to start wars. Oil was used to get Japan to attack us on Pearl Harbor. I'll explain this. I explained this so many damn times. I taught this so many damn times. You know what people remember this? 0! I'll give a summary, a simplified summary of this as a separate lecture because people don't remember jack. Nothing sticks in their heads. It's a constant stream of just blank space. So because of that, people are going to say, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. No, it's idiot theory. It's idiot theory. Because you don't remember anything. You can't even define conspiracy theory in a sentence. But the critical question is, would this new war again destroy OPEC and consequently cause oil prices to fall? So let's see what happened. Here's a sequence of events in the first Gulf War. USA CIA encourages Kuwait to overproduce oil to take advantage of Iraq's desperate economic conditions and thus pressure Iraq. Kuwait's actual production data proves this, because that's exactly what they did. After 9 months of Iraqi high quota cheating, Iraq warned Kuwait to stop 4 times and then placed 100,000 soldier invasion force on the border with Kuwait. The very next day, the Bush administration did far more than leave Kuwait hung out to dry, which means abandoned when in danger. The Bush administration actively encouraged Saddam to attack by giving him 3 blatant and unequivocal green light signals to invade Kuwait. That Bush move was extreme opposite of what should have been done. And no sneaky bullshit liar can spin that otherwise. This is what should have been done. I outlined exactly what should have been done. Bush does the crazy opposite. 3 green light signals. Oh, we got no defense treaty with Kuwait, so do whatever the hell you want. We got no special defense or security commitment to Kuwait. Right? I know you're on the border to invade, so do whatever the hell you want. We have no opinion on Arab border disputes, so do whatever the hell you want. That's what he's saying. After Iraq invaded Kuwait, the Bush administration flipped from green light signals to statements of outrage. It was a 180 flip. Oh, what the hell are you doing? Wait a minute, you just greenlit the attack. Now you flip. I remember watching Saddam Hussein on CNN. Right? He's confused. He's like, what the hell? You guys tell me to go. I remember that. I wish I had transcripts of the reporting, but you know your damn transcripts. Fucking CNN. Also, after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, oil production from both countries ceased. United Nations sanctions against Iraq and Kuwait because Iraq now is in control of Kuwait's oil. That caused a combined loss of 4.5 million barrels per day. However, there was never a loss because right away, immediately, Saudi Arabia picked up 3.5 million barrels per day to make up that loss, and then Iran picked up the remaining 1 million barrels per day. Therefore, there was never a loss of world oil supply. All right. Then the Bush administration built a coalition of nations aligned against Iraq, amounting to a massive military force. The U.S. forces alone were massive, with over 500,000 soldiers stationed in Saudi Arabia, prepared to attack Iraqi forces in Kuwait. On January 17th, that's when the air war started against Iraq. Right? On February 24th, after 5 weeks of round-the-clock bombing to destroy command control, communication, sever sensor systems, key weapons, but also for the purpose of water, food, sleep deprivation, and psychological. I believe this is probably just as important, if not more important, than these. Equally important than destroying command control, communication sensors, key weapons. Right? The ground war was won in only 100 hours. It was a brilliant victory. Americans feel good. Right? Euphoria was high. When I wrote the strategy for the Gulf War back in 90, I know people are going to attack. I don't remember that. You don't remember that. That's not true. Shit, no one remembers anything. I predicted this public response. That was part of my strategy. I said, this is going to be totally feasible, publicly and politically. I said that on the spectrum of military force application, high intensity, short duration, made feasible by open desert war with limited objectives, right? Limited objectives make it short duration. That will sell well with the U.S. public and thus be politically viable, right? Now, the first Gulf War had 2 key results. One, OPEC was destroyed for nearly a decade, and oil prices fell when they should have rose. I'll explain this below with this data here. The first Gulf War created 4 out of 5 of bin Laden's motives for attacking the USA on 9/11. Thus, the first Gulf War played a critical role in starting the war on terror. See, I'm telling you, these wars are all linked. Now, if you can retain something in your brain, you will follow it. If you can't retain anything, you'll say, that's crazy. That's unbelievable. Why? Because social reality is going to say that. Based on nothing. And everyone's going to believe it because they got nothing in their brains. Nothing in their brains. They retain nothing. Bin Laden's motive for his 9/11 attacks. 4 out of 5 reasons. This comes from Bruce Lawrence's book, Messages to the World. The Statements of Osama bin Laden. I forget how thick it was. It's probably 250, 300 pages thick. Packed full of his speeches and his writings. Right? I read this because I wanted to figure out what made Saddam tick. And he said the same 5 things over and over again. 1, he's pissed off about the WMD inspections after the first Gulf War and the United Nations sanctions on oil, which resulted in the death of what he said was 600,000 Iraqi kids. Now, he got his information from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, right, who estimated 567,000 Iraqi kids died due to these sanctions, oil sanctions. All right, that's due to the first Gulf War, a direct outcome of the first Gulf War. And then bin Laden was all pissed off at U.S. wars against Muslims in the Middle East, and also throughout the rest of the world too. He mentioned that, not just in the Middle East. But he focused on the Middle East. Now, what was the first Gulf War? A big war against Arab nations in the Middle East. Over 100,000 Iraqis were killed. Over 100,000. And then after the war, because of the war, permanent U.S. occupation forces in the Middle East. Prior to that, you had security contractors in Saudi Arabia. All right. And then now, what was bin Laden's problem with these? Did he say, oh, you got permanent stationing of U.S. soldiers desecrating the Holy Land? Bullshit, he didn't say that. He said, they're there to steal our oil and our wealth. He never said jack about, oh, they're desecrating the Holy Land. I mean, you read the stuff. At best, he's saying, oh, God is on our side. Right? One time he used that stupid 70 virgins things. Right? One time in the whole damn book. And I'm willing to bet he didn't believe it. He's just trying to pump up some young, stupid, hormone-crazed idiot young men to go do some terrorist crap. Right? He's being manipulative. Any money. He didn't believe that crap. All right. And then he's pissed about U.S.-Saudi collusion to lower oil price. He was wrong here. The real cause of the fall in oil price was Saudi debt. All right, I'll explain that below here. Saudi debt prevented OPEC unity in dropping oil production. That made it impossible for Saudi Arabia to drop production. So the war created that debt for Saudi Arabia. So the war once again busted OPEC. And with low oil prices, revenues fell. And given the fact that Saudi Arabia is largely one big welfare state, well, there was welfare cutbacks. So Saudi's standard of living fell and poverty increased. Right? Bin Laden was pissed about that. Now, his fifth reason, and the only reason that was not directly related to the first Gulf War, was U.S. unstinted support for Israel. And the reason why that is not directly related to the first Gulf War is because it preceded the first Gulf War. Since Israel became a state back in what, 47 or 8 or so, right? USA supported them, right? So this one was not the only one that was not first Gulf War related. But the lion's share of Bin Laden's motives were due to the first Gulf War. Now, never, ever I spell infidels. Oh, infidels. Yeah, never was he saying, "Oh yeah, we got to go kill those Christian infidels." Never. That's what the media said. Crap like that. Media says bullshit, baseless liars. Never in the whole damn book did he say that once. All right. So now, after the war, after the first Gulf War, Saudi Arabia was socked with massive debt. One, Saudi Arabia had its own big bills to pay from their own war effort. Two, George H.W. Bush got the Saudi Arabia to pay $36 billion out of the USA $60 billion war cost. Right, 60% of the U.S. bill for the war was paid by Saudi Arabia. That's a big debt right there. Then the war increased the perceived threat from Iraq, and so Saudis made big weapons purchases after the war from USA and Britain. I know they bought a bunch of F-15s from USA, and they bought a bunch of Challenger tanks from Britain. These three big expenses combined to form a massive debt, which created pressure to increase oil production, or at least not diminish it. Never cut back. All right. Debt once again proves to be a weapon, leverage, as it did since the early 80s. Now, Kuwait is socked with massive debt, right? The war destroyed Kuwait, oil wells in the city, right? They got to rebuild. Kuwait also then made big weapons purchases. Massive debt. Immense pressure to increase oil sales, or at least not decrease oil production. And then, here's a side note. Don't forget, who got all the contracts to rebuild Kuwait? Halliburton, KBR, Bechtel. Big money makers for the power elites. Kuwait, I'm going to say, was less of a factor than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was a big obstruction to OPEC unity. Once again, war involving OPEC nations destroyed OPEC unity. This time, the chief culprit was Saudi debt. The Saudis had made the greatest gains in oil production volume with the addition of 3.5 million barrels per day to make up for the Iraq-Kuwait loss. Right? Remember that? Because of this, the other OPEC nations demanded that Saudi Arabia make the first and biggest oil production cuts in order for OPEC to control price. But Saudi Arabia refused because they're burdened with extreme debt. They could not afford to cut. The war created debt, and the war prevented Saudi Arabia from cutting oil production, so it busted OPEC. The war busted OPEC. All right? I'm connecting it together for you. So you cannot say, what? Me no see no connection. That not true. There's no connection between war and debt and oil production and OPEC unity. No connection whatsoever. Only a retard would say that. A big white wall. Empty and blank, uncomprehending. Brought to be the Scrivener problem. God. Herman Melville crap. Saudi Arabia, okay, burden of debt cannot cut. And this became the big sticky point in the 1990s. This is what destroyed OPEC. Look it up. I read every damn article in the New York Times between 1989 to about 2003 on OPEC. Every damn article. If you don't do the same thing, shut up. You have no idea what's driving OPEC decisions. All you got is stupid base of social reality. Bunch of idiots. Oh, but they all get together, so that's true because we all say so. All the idiots who know nothing, get no facts, no knowledge, no intelligence. Get a big simple wave in a 10-second blurb. That explains it all. So OPEC unity was destroyed, causing a loss of price control. And oil prices plunged when they should have risen. I'll explain this in a second. OPEC was broken for nearly a decade, 9 years. It's about 99, 2000. It was a classic divide and conquer. Destroy OPEC unity. Break out Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, especially Saudi Arabia. War creates debt. Debt creates leverage. All right. Now, all of the above was predicted by oil analysts and economists immediately at the time of the Gulf War, and all of it came true. All of it, therefore, was completely predictable, especially for George H.W. Bush, who was both an oil expert and the former director of the CIA. You know Bush knows exactly what's going to happen here. Oil prices fell in 1990 when they should have climbed dramatically due to, one, the fall of the Soviet Union, which plummeted Russian oil production from 11.5 million barrels per day to 6 million barrels per day. Plus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan also fell a little bit also as well. Former republics of the Soviet Union. And the Asian economy was taking off, both of which should have dramatically increased oil price. So this is what actually happened. Oil prices fell during the Gulf War, for the decade after the Gulf War, but they should have rose similar to this. This is low spare production capacity. The conditions were similar in the 1990s, except for OPEC. So here's an example. In 1991, all right, the Soviet Union fell, right? This is the 1990s, that decade. Look at oil production. As the Soviet Union was crumbling, right? Oil production went from 11.5 million barrels today, barrels per day, to 6. All right, that's almost cut in half. You lost 5.5 million barrels per day. That's a massive loss. Oil prices should have skyrocketed with that alone. And then you have Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan going down a little bit. You know, that's not much of a drop, but they dropped a little bit, right? At the same time, you got Asian economies taking off. I'll give you 6 examples. Look, this is the 90s. 90s decades, each one of these cases. Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, they're all taking off, steep climbs. Look at India. It's not as steep here as in 2000s, but damn, that's pretty damn steep. It's climbing fast, right? India was flat forever. They're all poor and starving. Then bam, they're going up. Now China was less dramatic. They didn't take off into the 2000s, all right? But they're increasing somewhat, all right? They're adding a little bit, all right? So that's increasing demand for oil. Why? Economy increases, commerce increases, transportation increases, oil consumption increases. Duh! Don't try to argue that. So here is a summary review. This is the end of it. In 1971, the USA lost control of oil price to OPEC. Throughout the rest of the 1970s, OPEC screwed the U.S. economy with high oil prices. The U.S. economy proved vulnerable to being held hostage by oil price, suffering recession and stagflation. Now, don't tell me back then oil price killed the U.S. economy. Everyone knew that back then. Don't say, oh, me no remember that. I don't remember that. That's not true. This meant the USA had to find a way to regain control of oil price, or at least take it away from OPEC. And it found it in war between OPEC nations in the Middle East. Right? All right. You know how here's a simple mechanism of how high oil prices killed the economy. One way was through inflation, all right? But high inflation back then also caused high interest rates. That was a key thing that killed the economy. Now today we're starting to get inflation, all right? In certain elements of the consumer price index basket, all right? All right? But interest rates are not budging at all. All right, the Fed is not moving interest rates up at all because the economy is so crap. The economy is crap as it is. So what happened is the economy's crap. You get inflation, right? There's no way the Fed's going to decrease interest rates when the economy's so crapped out. So this is not the same situation at all. I know liars may try to say, oh, that's not true today. Well, so what? Different situation back then. I know the liars are going to try any sort of crap. And the idiots can't analyze crap for economics. At best, they got simple association. I swear people are retards. For the OPEC nations at war, the high cost of war necessitated increased oil production. Duh! How do they pay for their weapons? How do they pay for all the war costs? How do they pay for the reconstruction? They gotta sell oil. If they take out loans, they gotta pay it back with oil. Also, the Sunni nations increased oil production to wage economic warfare on Iran, driving down oil price, reducing Iran's revenues. The Reagan administration fueled the Iran-Iraq war by providing military intelligence, weapons, munitions, and other war materials to both sides. Especially significant were the intelligence and critical weapons the Reagan administration provided to Iran both before and during the fall offensive, which put Iraq in jeopardy, having lost access to the Persian Gulf. And it also increased threat to Sunni nations. It also added to Iraq's debt and economic crisis. Right? Don't tell me the U.S. did not play a big role in that. How big exactly is hard to put a number on. The Sunni nations responded to the threat with increased oil overproduction, and prices plummeted after February 1986. The Iran-Iraq war proved highly effective at controlling, lowering oil price. And it worked in one war, so it ought to work in another war. So if it worked in one war, the Iran-Iraq war, it ought to work in another war, the first Gulf War. After the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq's economy was devastated and burdened with a massive $86 billion debt. In November 1989, the U.S. CIA helped create Saddam's motive for invading Iraq, right, in the first Gulf War, by cajoling and convincing the Kuwaitis to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis and pressure them with increased oil overproduction, which would drive down price and thus steal revenue from Iraq. The USA CIA assured Kuwait of backing by offering broad cooperation and coordination at a high level. Kuwait maintained the heightened oil overproduction from November 86, the time of the meeting with Director of CIA Webster, until Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 2nd. Starting in June 1990, Iraq threatened Kuwait 4 times. And then on July 22nd, placed 30,000 men attack force on the Kuwaiti border, quickly building it up to 100,000 men. That's 10 army divisions. This is an absolute and undeniable threat. Nevertheless, on July 24th, the Bush administration gave Saddam Hussein the first of 3 absolute green light signals. Unequivocal green light signals. This was not merely abandoning Kuwait when in danger. This was actively encouraging an attack upon Kuwait. Not only was this insanely and unexcusably stupid, it was the extreme opposite of what should have been done. No amount of stupidity in the entire world can explain this. It's humanly impossible to be that stupid. I showed you what should have been done. I showed you they did the exact opposite. But if you take it all together, it makes perfect sense. And it's clearly a sucker move to start a new war between OPEC nations. The USA fueled the Iran-Iraq war, providing intelligence, weapons, munitions to both sides. The Iran-Iraq war proved highly effective at destroying OPEC and its ability to control oil price. The Iran-Iraq war greatly lowered oil price. The USA CIA cajoled Kuwait into increasing overproduction of oil, to take advantage of Iraq's economic crisis, thus crushing Iraq, and this became Saddam's key motive uh, for invading Iraq. And then, after 4 Iraq threats to Kuwait, along with Saddam placing 100,000 soldiers on the Kuwaiti border, poised to attack, the Bush administration gives Saddam 3 green light signals. Given the whole picture, taken all together, it is easy to see that this was not a series of insanely stupid, accidental decisions, but rather a calculated setup, a clear sucker move to manufacture a new OPEC war, to once again destroy OPEC unity. And control of oil price. And it worked perfectly, with OPEC being once again destroyed and unable to control price for the next 9 years. And oil prices fell dramatically when 2 key factors should have raised oil price: the collapse of Soviet production and Asian economies taking off. Finally, even before the first Gulf War began, numerous oil experts predicted the war would destroy OPEC, and it did. Key outcome of the first Gulf War: OPEC was busted for 9 years, and oil prices fell at a time when they should have rose, with a combined loss of Russian production and the swift growth of Asian economies. The world economy grew at an average around 3% during this period of the 90s. That's substantial growth. The first Gulf War became the source of 4 out of 5 bin Laden's motives for attacking the USA on 9/11. Therefore, the first Gulf War led to the War on Terror. Following the first Gulf War proved that if war involving OPEC nations can effectively destroy OPEC unity and thus lower oil price in one war, the Iran-Iraq War, then it ought to work in another war, and it did. I'm not going to show you this movie because you know what? The only thing that's going to be remembered is this movie. It's because it's kind of funny. I was going to finish off with a funny joke, but I'm not going to, because I know that nothing else will be remembered but the funny joke. Then everyone's going to say, "Oh, it's bullshit because it's not. It's like the movie, The Longest Yard." That's the only thing that people are going to remember. I know human cognition. It's not going to retain any of this. So, I've done an excellent job teaching it all. But will people retain it? No! So you're going to get another big stupid attack based on nothing. And all the morons are going to fall for it. Just watch. No stopping it. You can't stop morons. You can't make them intelligent.